This is a production of KMmedia.pro. Welcome back to Positive Talk Radio. Our goal is simple: to explore evolving ideas one conversation at a time. So come on over into our world. I know you'll like it, because on today's show, today we get to feature an amazing author who has written a bunch of Western-style books, and his name is David A. Bowles, and I'm going to introduce him in just a second more thoroughly. But first, I want to talk to my friend Eric. How are you today, sir?
Happy Monday. I'm doing fine, Kevin. Hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving.
I did, and you?
Yeah, it was pretty decent. Made all the fixins and had my dad come over, and we had a good time.
Thank you for inviting the old fellow over. I know what that's like now from the other side.
And of course, you were welcome, but I neglected to send a formal invitation to you. But just know that you're always welcome.
Well, thank you, sir. I was meeting my son's new girlfriend and her two kids, and we had a really nice time. And it's really cool, especially a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old. It's been a while since I've been around that age group, and it's refreshing.
Well, that's a ball of energy. So hopefully some of that rubbed off.
Exactly, and it was a lot of fun. And I just want to say to everybody that if you had a Thanksgiving that was more just like regular Thursday to you, I want to invite you to stay here and talk to us, because we really care about you guys, and we really hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving and is going into the Christmas season is going to have a wonderful time as well. So I just wanted to say we appreciate you and thank you for being here. And I know Eric agrees with that.
Of course.
And Eric, when you were a kid, did you grow up? Did you have your favorite author? Did you read?
Did I read?
I mean, read books.
Yes, of course. I mean, it was mandatory in school for one thing, but
exactly. One of my favorite genres was the old Western. Louis L'Amour, who
that was my grandfather's favorite author.
Yeah, and he wrote book after book after book, and even John Wayne was in some of the movies that they made out of his books and stuff. And we have a gentleman that we're going to be talking to in just a second, who is in that vein. His name is David Bowles. He is his website is called westernsagas.com. Go there, and he's got tons of books, and really is a fun guy who's also a bit of a history buff of the Old West, including one of the places that's on my bucket list, which is called the Alamo. I'm sure you've heard of that.
I remember it well.
You were there, weren't you?
No.
And that if the Alamo escapes you, if you're wondering what that was in, I believe it was 1836. The Texans had declared independence from Mexico, and Santa Anna came up, and 186, and David will correct me on these numbers, but 186 people, including Jim Bowie and Davy Crockett, were killed at the Alamo defending Texas, and which led to the creation of the state. And he talks about a lot of those things, and he is a real Western dude. He is in Texas himself, and he wears a cowboy hat and boots and all that stuff. So David, welcome to the show. How are you?
Glad to be here. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. And I'm one of those guys that didn't have such a great one. I had a poor old Becca got sick on me. Somebody fed her too much on Thanksgiving. And I've been fighting a battle here with the dog. But I'm glad to be here. And I appreciate you talking about the Alamo. That's a favorite of mine. And your math is pretty doggone good, Kevin. It's 189. But for many years, you might have found it in an old book. And you might have been right, because they found 3 more came up and proved that they were there about 20 years ago. So up till about 20 years ago, 186 was the correct number, and now it's 189. So they've had to put a few extra names on the cenotaph since it was installed.
I'm glad you cleared that up because I had no idea. I always had it in my mind 186, but it doesn't matter because
it's close.
These guys, when we talk about that time frame and we talk about people that they were standing there at the Alamo for those 13 days and they were staring at close to 5,000 troops and they knew that they probably were not going to survive. And it's amazing the courage that people had in those days.
And can I say something about that? A lot of people ask about William B. Travis, who was the commander of the Alamo. He drew a line in the sand, and he asked those that were going to stay with him to come across the line, and those that didn't, he would not forgive. He understood. He said because they all knew that they were going to die there, and only one went over the wall. And that was a guy by the name of Moses Rowe. And people ask me, say, well, is that about William B. Travis drawing a line in the sand? And I always say yes, because we had the eyewitness, and you got to think about it when he admitted that he was, you might say, a deserter and went over the wall. But obviously he had very good reason. But he told the story about William B. Travis had drawn a line in the sand, and that William B. Travis gave them the opportunity to leave, and he's the only one that chose to do so.
David. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's just fact.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that there are people listening to us right now that have heard the term drawing a line in the sand, but they have no idea what it's in reference to or what it was about. And that was at one point when it became clear, and correct me if my history is wrong, but it became clear that they were not going to get any help from Sam Houston, and that Goliad had been destroyed and a lot of people had died there, and that they weren't going to get any help. That's when they realized that things were not going to go well for them long term, and he gave them the opportunity at that point to leave if they so choose. Am I close?
Kevin, you amaze me. Of course, we're taught these things in Texas, and we're taught Texas history, and of course, we have to know those things in Texas. But I'm impressed that you know all those facts. Like I say, you only missed that number 3, but there were a little over 200, in the beginning. And of course, they had to send some reinforcements. They sent carrier messengers out to try and get some more help. And so there was quite a few of them that left the Alamo before the battle started, trying to muster up some army folks, to come and fight the battle.
Now I got to ask you, because I'm not real clear, and that is David Crockett. He by the way, he didn't like the name Davy. You told me the last time we talked.
That's right. He wanted to be called David.
And so David Crockett, and I think there was a band of 25 or 30 Tennesseans that came with him. And was he expecting to defend the Alamo, or was that just happenstance?
Well, all of this came up. He got fed up in Tennessee and told them, and excuse me for using this word, but this is what Davy Crockett said. He said to the legislature of Tennessee, you guys can go to hell and I'm going to Texas. And that's exactly what he said. And he came to Texas. I guess, I don't think he was intended to die there, but he ended up there in one of those 189 men. But the interesting thing about Davy Crockett, this Tennessean, and his group of Tennesseans, he came in and asked William B. Travis, says, where's your weakest point of entry into this garrison known as the Alamo? And he pointed it out, and that's where it was a place where the wall was down. They placed a cannon in there, and he and his men were there with literally no protection, hardly at all, from the barrage of Santa Ana. So he was truly a hero of the Alamo and his men. that came from Tennessee.
You know, and the last time we talked, I was lamenting the fact that, you know, we have sites like that, which is on my bucket list to go see, and other places like Tombstone. And I went to Tombstone, and it's turned into a tourist trap. And it's not really, you know, they fake the gun battle, but it's not really it doesn't really give you a flavor of what it was like back then to live in that town. Tell me what they're doing with the Alamo now to kind of resurrect the original experience of being there.
Well, what they've done, the state of Texas has taken it over. The General Land Office is in charge of it, and they have appropriated several $1 million. The city of San Antonio owns property in front of the Alamo, and it's a collaboration between the city, the state, the county, and the merchants in downtown San Antonio. And you have to realize we're a town of 1.4 million people, and that Alamo sits right in the middle of it. And what is there now is only the chapel. A lot of people don't understand that. They'll walk in there and say, oh, man, this thing is small. Well, all of the fortress and stuff is gone. They haven't marked where the fortress did go all the way down to the river and around. And so it's there to be seen. But for many years, we have been like that with you know, carnival-like atmosphere there on that hollowed ground. Buses and trolley cars and everything else, horse carriages and stuff for the city going right over that hollowed ground. That is being corrected as we speak. It might be another 2 years before it's finalized, but we've already got a big museum that's been put in there, and it's magnificent. They've got that complete. But what they're going to do is put a wall around it and make it like those buildings that are across the way. Will be a museum now that have been just little, souvenir stores is what they were. And it's going to be in 2 years, it's going to really be nice. And it will give some semblance of what it's like. It is pretty hard when you're in downtown of a 1.4 million people to kind of bring something back. And I have people joking. I've taken tours down there, and people have said, well, why in the world did they build it downtown? You know? But what I do when I do some tours, I kind of limit it to what I do, but sometimes I actually took the family of Davy Crockett family. They have had a reunion there at the Alamo several years ago. And I took them out to the mission San Jose, and there are 5 missions in San Antonio. And I can take someone there into the missions that are away from town and show them what it's like. And if you're out in your area in California, there's a lot of missions that are still in that state with the fortress around it. But it was a garrison, you know, and people they had their gardens, you know. When the Spaniards were there, they had their gardens, and then the church was there. But now at the time of the Alamo, the church, Catholic Church had abandoned it, and so it was no longer a church at the time of the battle.
It had become a fortress because that was the only place that they thought could support them, right?
For a battle, it's the only place. You know, it just happened to be there. It wasn't built for that purpose. It was built there for the missionaries to live and house. You know, and so it's a shrine. And you know, one of the things that happens there, and some people are shocked by it, is that there's a Texas Ranger or Alamo Ranger standing at the door, and everyone is asked to remove their hat. And they say it in such a nice way. And they say, sir or madam, do you mind removing your hat, because this is a shrine? And you know, when you step in there, you're in a you're on hallowed ground, and people expect that. And there's never there's no ticket, there's nothing to buy. The lady that her name was Dickerson, that bought the land and saved it from being demolished. What she said when she gave it to the state of Texas is that no one should ever be charged to come to this hallowed ground. So they take donations, but they do not. And I got to tell you funny stories all the time. I'll tell you, I should have told you the other day. I said, come on down, I'll buy you a ticket. So I do that a lot. I said, don't worry about tickets. I'll take care of that for you.
Well, that's awfully nice of you.
Yeah. But it's nice now, and but you have to realize what it is, that so much of it, the walls and stuff were destroyed. So the only thing left is actual mission, where really no fighting took place in that Alamo that you see, that big facade that you see all the time. There was no fight. That was the church, and that's where the women and the sick. And Jim Bowie, he was on his deathbed, and that's where they were, and the children and a few slaves. And they were the ones that were saved.
It's an amazing thing about American history, is that's one of the. Well, I was going through my mind of, especially in the Old West, but Gettysburg and the Alamo falls into that. There aren't very many that fall into that category of the type of facility and what happened there. So it's an important place. You know, the Little Bighorn comes to mind of another place, but nobody wants to go live there. So that's why it's pretty desolate still. But it's important that we have people like you that are writing about that time, because it is really important. Let's talk about you, the author. First of all, before I go there, I'm concerned. How's your puppy doing?
She's laying over here by me, and she's just doing pretty good right now. She's had a tough couple of nights, but she's coming along.
Oh, that's good. I really wish her well, because...
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Because you also have been traveling the country with your golden retriever, right?
She's a yellow lab. Lab.
Well, I knew she was yellow or something, but a yellow lab, and you guys have got into a mobile home or a motor home, a 40-footer for a while. Now you've downsized all the way to a 26-footer, and you travel the country, and I think that's great. That I think more people should do that. What do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I'm loving it, and I'll tell you, it's a great opportunity to sell books. I set up my travels around book signings and library talks and things like that. So I work my travel in with selling my books and promoting my Westward Sagas series.
Now, the Western Sagas series, what motivated you to begin writing that?
You know, I'm so glad you asked that. Kevin?
Me too.
I sat on the front porch with my family and heard these stories, which some of them were just almost unbelievable. And the story about my the little 9-year-old, my grandmother told about my 9-year-old, I guess he would be like a cousin, being captured there on the creek by the Indians in Austin. That was in 1841. And how he was taken, the Comanches took him off to Taos and all that. They were telling me the story, and then I decided I've got to research that. And I said, man, this would make a good book. And I went down to the University of Texas campus, and that's where the LBJ Library and the Center of American History is. Someone had told me that there's a lot of information about that abduction that happened, and they have the letters. And I call them the letters of Angelina. And I thought about putting a little book together about her letters. And what I'm talking about, the letters, she had the first letter that she received. It had a 1-cent stamp on it. And the postmaster had written, deliver free. Anyhow, that story so touched my heart. I mean, tears. I'm sitting there's a man by the name of Lewis Jones that was in Independence, Missouri, that didn't know the family, didn't know anything but what they did. The Good Samaritans put this little boy on when they paid $60 to ransom him, and they put him on a wagon train to Independence. And when he ended up there, the people in the wagon train had kind of, took him in and took care of him. And they asked the man there by the name of Lewis Jones if they would take care of him and see that he got back to Texas. Because in that way, back in those days, the Santa Fe Trail was all there was. And the only way to get to Texas from there was go by horse or take the Mississippi River down to New Orleans and come around. I won't bore you for how that happened, but I read that letter and I thought, that's Lewis Jones. Who is this guy? And I found out that he was the fan that founded Independence, Missouri, and his home still is there. And that got me started. And then I started reading the letters of all the Good Samaritans that were trying to help get this little boy back. And it just made a beautiful story. And I my original thought was just to write a book about that. And this was my last book, Comanche Trace. But there's a man by the name of H.W. Brand, quite an author in Texas, and he belongs to the same writing league I do out of Austin, the Writers League of Texas. And I was at a function, and I had an opportunity to talk to him and tell him about what I was thinking about. And he said, David, you need to go back to why this family came to Texas. And that's what I did. I went back and researched that. And so I spent 10 or 12 years doing the research before I started the book at about in 2003. So the series started really in about 2003, and it's now into the 5th book. Hope I answered your question. I'm sorry it took so long with that.
No, you did. You did beautifully, and because I think there are a lot of people that are alive now who are not students of history, that are not really aware of the difficulty with which people traveled in those days. And you told me something the last time we talked that I had no idea about, that at one point, Texas, the border of Texas went all the way up to Oklahoma or Wyoming.
A 42nd parallel. Matter of fact, if you look at one of the maps of Texas prior to 1850, it took in half of New Mexico, most of Oklahoma, and went all the way up and through Colorado, and then ended at the 42nd parallel.
So, when we start thinking about that size of Texas at the time, in 1836, when they declared their independence from Mexico, that was, they could have been almost half the size of the United States.
Yes, sir. And at that time, yes, it was much larger than the United States. But the exact area of ground was 63 million square miles.
That's a big place.
Yeah. So, and the United States government wanted to buy it for $10 million.
Well, heck, they got the Louisiana Purchase for like 13 or something silly.
Yeah, but $10 million worth a lot of money back in those days. But
it was. Yeah, but a lot of people, David, don't really, unless you've studied the time period, they don't recognize how hardy these people were, how difficult the journey was, how dangerous it was, all the way along they came from Tennessee all the way to Texas.
And it was quite a trip. And, there were no interstates back in those days. And it was pretty difficult. And a lot of people think about the freight wagons and Ma and Pa sitting on I get tickled all the Western movies. They got Ma and Pa sitting on the buckboard, driving the wagon. Well, those big freight wagons that they came in, prairie schooners or whatever you called them, they didn't they made the women and children get out of them and walk because it was too dangerous. If the furniture shifted or supply farming equipment or whatever were to shift in those big freight wagons, it'd kill them. So it wasn't safe. So they walked along. Every once in a while, you'll see him move his right, and they walk. Man, the man that's running, he's walking along. He's walking along beside them with some of them with a bullwhip. They whistle along. Then when they got tired, they had a little board that they could put down and set on that board. But they didn't. These people had to walk all the way from Tennessee to Texas.
And it's not like, if you are listening to this and you're around today, it's not like you could go to the Czech Medical Center down the block if you had a problem, or if you broke something, or if you fell and hurt yourself. There was nothing there. And so the death rate, I'm told, from those excursions were very, very high. And is that, in your research, is that proven to be true?
Yes, very, very much so. Very, very much so. And the Indians, I mean, they weren't just real happy about the white man coming down here and taking their happy hunting grounds. They had good reasons of it. And I can tell you one of the things that people don't understand about the clash between the Indians and the white man was that the Indians could never understand land ownership, and these Anglo Europeans came over, and of course people own land over there. And they wanted the same thing. And of course, the Republic of Texas was given land. They were given every single man, if he would stay there and homestead it, a section of land, which is 640 acres. That was a pretty good bounty. And so a head right, they called it, Kevin. And the thing about that land ownership, I read stories where there'd be a rancher or something, and he'd look out his window and he'd see a group of Indians setting up teepees on his property, and he'd get all upset about it.
Really?
And the Indians, they just they couldn't understand that a man could own that land, because that land had always been theirs. And that was the big thing there, that they just couldn't. If they had ever been able to convince the Indians, hey, we'll give you land just like we're giving but they didn't understand that. And it if you understand the Indian culture, even the Indians will tell you that they just didn't understand that was the big thing that divided them, was the land issue.
Well, yeah, because they roamed a large, and most of the time they were following the game.
That's right.
And the animals that they used to live on, and they, the buffalo and the antelope and the cattle and all the things that they lived on, and so they would move to where the game was so that they could live. So it wasn't like they didn't put up fences, and they didn't raise cattle and do it that way. They just followed the game.
Exactly.
And it's when you, and I know that with the amount of research that you've done, that there are lots of things that we as a country could have done better as far as managing the when we moved west. In this day and age, I think it's important for us to recognize it, but not to dwell on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's water under the bridge. Water under the bridge. We got a pretty good thing going for us. My grandkids, I got a grandson that he used to crawl up in my lap, and he says, "Grandpa, tell me about the good old days." And I said, "Son, you're living them."
That is so true. You know what one of the things that makes me glad that I live in this time, and there are so many people that are like me, it's because of the invention of indoor plumbing.
Yes. Think about that. And that's why cholera kills so many. We talked about so many people dying. Cholera was one of the biggest killers of the people that moved here. They had no idea what was causing it. The cities, they started, the cities and stuff. And it wasn't till latter part of 1800s that they finally got a handle on what was causing cholera. And you're exactly right. It was not half. The plumbing situation wasn't very good in most of these cities.
Well, and a lot of them, they didn't have showers. And, it was like that old expression, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Remember that one?
Yes, sir. And that's a true thing. I got to tell you, I had my first book. I created a fictional character called Trapper John, and he claimed he was raised by a bear and that sort of thing. His hygiene was a little bit lax, and he befriended this other, and he was going to dinner, and so this guy told him, it says, well, he says, I want you to go over there in my cabin, and he says, and he made him a tub of water and left him there and to bathe, and he said, now don't forget to wash where the sun don't shine. So the guy goes out, gives the guy an hour or so to get cleaned up, and he came back in, and the guy had moved the wash tub. And he says, he moved it over by the window, and he says, you told me it was in the sunlight. He says, you told me not to wash where the sun don't shine.
It's an amazing. We've come so far in our culture. By the way, we're talking with David Bowles. He is the author of the
Western Sagas.
Thank you so much. The Western Saga. I was scrolling up to it right there. And there are 5 books in the series, and I highly encourage you to get them. I'm lobbying for this to become a mini series. That's what I'd like to see.
Man, that's great. I would love that. And that's kind of what I envisioned. And I will tell you, I wrote it in such a way that it would be very easy to convert to a screenplay or a miniseries or something like that.
Things like there have been lots of them that were done and became miniseries and stuff. Anyway, we're talking with David A. Bowles, and we're going to be right back. We need to take a short break, just a couple of seconds or so, and I want you to appreciate the sponsors and to hang out with us some more. This is a fascinating discussion, and we're going to be talking more with David right after these messages. You're listening to Positive Talk Radio.
When you want to say more than words communicate, you can with flowers. Your custom boutique floral studio in Bothell, Washington is anaturaldesign.com, connecting you to nature through the language of flowers. Where your people are is where our flowers are beautiful. Your success is our goal. Now through New Year's Eve, here's your exclusive bonus for being our appreciated listener. Type in promo code Positive Talk Radio at checkout to receive $20 off your order. Our gift to you for being here with us today. anaturaldesign.com.
These days, it's difficult to be able to do it all, especially as a small business owner. Marketing your business can be really tough, especially developing a presence on social media, creating commercial content, and media production. That's where KMmedia.pro can help. You see, in addition to creating a great podcast called Positive Talk Radio, we also have a radio show, video, audio production, content creation, including commercials, video shorts and trailers, voiceovers, social media development, and so much more. It only makes sense to hire a pro to get your business noticed. That's what we do. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information and to schedule a consultation to take your business stream to the next level. That's kmmedia.pro. Yes, we can. And welcome, everybody, back to Positive Talk Radio. My name is Kevin McDonald. I'm your host, and this is a little offbeat for us. A lot of times we talk about, self-development and coaching and stuff, but we're talking with a gentleman who it's really near and dear to my heart because David A. Bowles is with us, and he has written a Western saga. It's the Westward Sagas, and it's about a family in the mid 1800s that go from Tennessee to Texas and their trials and tribulations of what happened back then. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, David, was that you spent a long time researching these books, and you're not a spring chicken. I can say that because I'm not either. But when did you start writing, and what was your motivation other than the story that you were telling? But had you always wanted to be a writer?
Kevin, I always caught myself saying, damn, that would make a good book. My family would tell a story, and I can't believe it, And I tell you what, they told a lot of stories on that front porch and out under the big old willow tree that we had in the front yard. And I remember those stories like it was yesterday, and they would tell them, and it was kind of funny. Sometimes they'd be a little bit different, and I got tickled. My dad and his brothers, sitting around, and no, it wasn't that way. It was, this and that. And of course, they didn't know because it happened in the 1830s. Actually, you said 1850s, but we were talking the 1830s with when they came to Texas.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so as I started doing the research and getting into it and getting the story straight, and they were pretty well right on, except they didn't know how they came, how did they get here? They didn't know about going down the Nature's Trace and crossing the rivers and all that sort of stuff. And so as I documented that, and I was amazed at how today with the internet. Now you've got to realize that I started doing my research started about 1984, and I was given my great-grandmother's Bible. She was the first child born in Austin, Texas in 1841. And inside that Bible were documents and dates. And I'd go back, I had the names. Now you got to realize the family name that I was researching for this book, but the Smith. But fortunately, they had some odd first names, and the way that, like Fenwick Smith, and my grandmother was Rebecca. That's what my old pooch over here is named for. Rebecca is named for my four great grandmother. Rebecca spelled the way of the old Bible. And by having those spellings, I was able to find out so much information, and it's just a beautiful story. And and it was tough. Yes, it was tough, but those that survived did well.
Yeah, and if they got 600 acres of land, that would help. I'm struck, David, because you started doing research in the 1980s. Did you meet some of the children? Now, you wouldn't have met some of the folks that were actually there, but it is possible that you could have met some of the children or grandchildren of people that were there at one point. Did you?
Yes, and of course, my grandmother, Bowles, she was there, and she could tell some stories, and she kept. If you got a moment, I'll tell you a little story.
I got a moment.
She kept telling me that her granddad built the Capitol. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that picture of the state capitol of Texas. It's 3 foot taller than the one in Washington. It looks very similar. And a lot of times on TV, people are playing like they're in Washington, and they're using the Texas Capitol from the background.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. You can look at it. If it's pink, it's not the United States Capitol; it's the Texas Capitol. And she kept telling me that her grandfather, Lorenzo Van Cleve, built that Capitol. And my grandma, being my grandmother, I believed her. And in the fourth grade, I told my teacher that we took I went to school in Austin, and we went down to the Capitol for a tour. And I told her, I said, my granddaddy built this Capitol. And she says, "Oh, really?" She says, "Well, why don't you get me the information and write a book report?" And said, "You need a little help on your grades. I'll give you extra credit for it." Well, I went to my parents and started talking to them. I said, "I can't find any information that Lorenzo Van Cleve built the Capitol." And the only thing I found is that they use convict laborers to build that Capitol. So I kind of dropped it for quite a few years. And then suddenly I realized, looking in the Bible, that Lorenzo Van Cleve died in 1858. And that Capitol that we know, sitting there in the middle of at 11th and Congress Avenue in Austin, Texas, big, tall, beautiful building made of granite, Texas granite. And that building was built in 1888. So I said, well, she was sure wrong on that. I found a receipt from the state from the Republic of Texas for $60, and it was for Maribel Lamar, the president of the Republic of Texas at that time, to build a cabinet table. And then I started searching deeper, and you know what? He did build a Capitol, but not that one.
He built a predecessor to it.
Yeah, he built it was just a little wooden building. I managed to even find the pictures. And if anybody wanted to go to the website, I actually had, because there was no cameras back in those days. No. But it was what we'd just call a little dog trot house. It was like a cabin on one side, maybe 700 square feet, and then a dog trot in the middle, and then another one on the other side. And that's where the governor's office was, and where of course, the legislature didn't have near as many. We've got 254 counties now, but at that time we only had about 16 counties. So, it was a much smaller legislature and stuff. But that place now and I'm a little upset about that. I've contacted the Travis County Historical Society about it several times. There should be a marker there. That's where the original Capitol was. But when they built it, they kind of built it in a hurry. Everything that was built there was kind of ramshackle and he was just basically a carpenter, cabinet maker, and probably a pretty good one. But he did, and he's received 640 extra acres. And you're not going to believe where it was.
In Houston?
Dallas. on the Trinity River. Actually, I take that back. He for building the Capitol and the work, the paperwork, I said he was paid for building out the federal buildings in Austin, and he received 1,280 acres of bounty. And he sold it before he died, and he got $1 an acre for it. And it's right down on the Trinity River. Have you ever been into Dallas? You know where that is. Right downtown Dallas. But he sold it for $1 an acre. It's now right where he never lived there, and that was the thing. A lot of these guys that did things for the state. The Republic of Texas at that time had no money. So the only thing they had was a lot of land. So they could give it away in lieu of cash. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you've got 100,000 miles of stuff, and you can, or 100,000 square miles, you can parcel it out that way.
What the moral of the story is that Grandma was right. But she had and even my dad had no idea there was another Capitol, And it turns out there were three. There was the original wood one, and then they built a stucco one that was burned down in 1853. And then that's when the desk that he built lasted. But that desk that he built went through three presidents of the Republic of Texas and 8 governors before the fire that destroyed that table. And the reason I know that, I spent 10 years looking for that damn table in the Capitol.
Well, and I just want to implore everybody that's listening to this, because, when people get older and the generations pass, there's a section of history that gets lost with them. And I really would implore people, because now we are in a place where, and you'll appreciate this, David, we're in a place where if you fought in World War II, many of those guys are in their 90s now, and a lot of them are passing away. We need to keep that history alive, because what you did, you were able to keep the history of old Texas and the 1800s alive. And through your writings now and the books you've written, that is otherwise things that would be lost to humanity had you not taken the time to do that. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, Kevin, that's what I really had on my mind when I wrote the first book. And the first book was Spring House, and I dedicated it to my ancestors. And I wrote it in such a way that people that have read all my books, they say, well, you can really tell your first book you wrote for the family, because I wanted to make sure I documented everything in the back with an index and that sort of thing, and so that they could go back and find out, the copies of these letters and things like that. And I did have that in mind, and more people read the book that weren't family, and they said, I really liked your book. And that's when I decided to kind of make the book for commercial. But originally, the first book was just intended for my family. And we went to Greensboro, North Carolina, where Battle of Guilford Courthouse was fought, and our ancestor fought there, lived there. And I gave everybody a book. And that's really how it kind of started. But I really never even thought beyond commercializing the Westward Sagas, which at the second book, I decided, well, if this is going to be a series, we got to have a name for the series. And I own the trademark to Westward Sagas.
It's an important thing that you've done. And it's true, because you've studied it, and it's not fantasy. Now, there are, to be fair, there are some moments that have been lost to history, and you had to work with that a little bit, as an author will. And but you had the experience of what happened back then to make it all realistic and true to life.
And it's in the letters, and it's in the archives, and the info. And I like to say this for your audience: if your family's been here in this country at least 3 generations, there's a good chance that your family. The chances are really good that your family was probably here for the American Revolution, or at least the War of 1812, But they should go back and check that out. And the records are there now. I had to go to the courthouses to get my records. And now today, Ancestry.com, bless those people, they've done a wonderful job of documenting so many things. And you can find your genealogy, and you can find out who your ancestors were. And I love watching that show that's on public radio. The fellow's name was Gates, and he does this wonderful job of helping people find their roots, and to watch them sit there and cry sometimes when they found out, about their family and things like that. And of course, you take the chance. I know going down my trail, checking out my family, I found some really.
Not everybody can be a wonderfully educated and warm soul.
Exactly.
But they were people, and they were products of their time. And in those days, it was, your gun and you, and there wasn't even any law around for a long time.
Exactly.
It's a marvelous thing that you've done, David. David A. Bowles is the name of the author. His books remind me a great deal of Louis L'Amour, which I know you were a student of a bit.
Yes, sir.
And go to his website, which is westwardsagas.com, and you can buy all of his books, and you can buy even the book series and get them all done. And are they in audiobook and all that stuff yet?
No, I haven't done an audio book, and I'll tell you why. It's I think a book should be read and enjoyed like a good steak. Slowly and enjoy it. And somebody driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour, listening to my book, they're going to miss half the story. I'm not sold on this Audible book. Everybody keeps telling me I've got to do it, and I may someday do it, but I haven't yet. And the big thing is the cost to do the Audible books and the remuneration. It's just not there. And I've had people say, "Oh, you can make lots of money." Well, you can sell a lot of books, but and I got a dog here with a big vet bill. I got to try and make a few bucks here and there, Kevin.
Well, I'll tell you, I have done audiobooks. It's a time consuming thing, but a story like this would be an honor for me to tackle part of it or all of it for you. And I come relatively cheap, as my friends know.
Well, let's talk about it sometime, not on the air, but let's talk about it.
Fair enough. Again, we've just got a few minutes left. And I want to give you the opportunity, David, to tell our audience anything that you would like them to know about your work and your ancestors and the times. And we've got about 2 minutes. So anything that you'd like to let them know.
Well, I'd just like them to take a look, go to my website. The wonderful thing, or go to Amazon.com. You got free reads on there. You can go. And of course, I have electronic books. Like I said, I haven't done Audible yet, but I have electronic and I have the books. And then if you buy them from my website, you can get them autographed. And here, right at Christmas time, I can make them out to whomever you want to give a gift and send it directly to them. And that makes a nice gift. And the bundle, we call it, it's basically you get one of the books free. Where the latest book, which is my Sheriff of Starr County, which is really going to be a great book, won't be available until February, but it can be pre-ordered on Amazon.com. But you can buy the books from me or buy it from Amazon or your local bookstore. My wholesaler is Ingram Sparks, and they can get a book out in 2 to 3 days to any bookstore in America. So, the books are readily available. They may not be in your stores out in Seattle, but there's certainly the bookstores can get them real quick if you just go in there and ask for David A. Bowles. I might tell you also, there's another David Bowles in Texas that's an author. Doesn't live too far down the road from me, a couple 100 miles. But I'll tell you, as a friend told me, he said, "David, I can't believe you wrote that book because my genre is completely opposite. He's more into fantasy and that sort of thing. So you can kind of be surprised. My books are strictly in the West and have the label Westward Sagas on them. So, and if anybody wants to contact me, I'm also doing a little speaking and I travel around with old Becca and we put on a little show. And they can find me on Westward Sagas and see about what I do for entertainment. And I'd love to come out your way, going west, because that's what this stories about Western sagas going west.
That's right. Love to have you. Love to have you. It'd be great. It'd be great fun. And I just want to remind everybody, one of the things that we do here is we do something called Family Legacies. Don't let your family's legacy pass away and you not take advantage of seeing people and hearing people in their own voice tell their own stories. Whether we do it or somebody else does it, don't let history die. It's because if we do, then we're guaranteed to repeat some of the bad parts of it. And we don't want to do that. So David A. Bowles has been our guest. David, thank you so much for being here. westwordsagas.com. Go there. I want to thank everybody for being here. We will see you Wednesday at 4:00. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got.